every house to try to get them out of this house. Now, the Israeli news reported today that 20 Palestinians in the West Bank were shot dead by Hamas for trying to protest against the war. Hamas dragged out another 30 Palestinians today and shot them summarily, accusing them of collaborating with Israel. One of those 50 people shot to death by Hamas today are considered among the casualties. And the White House talks about published reports indicate that Israel could have done more to reduce casualties. I wonder what reports they're referring to. They're referring to reports by Al Jazeera. Are they referring to reports by the United Nations that brought us a couple of years old, the Goldstone report, which accused Israel of war crimes, and then only to have all of those accusations disproved, and even Judge Goldstone apologized for it? What published reports?
Israel has called on the United Nations to retract the Goldstone report on the 2008-2009 Israeli assault on Gaza after its author backtracked from some crucial findings. Judge Richard Goldstone chaired a fact-finding mission which said both Israel and Hamas were guilty of war crimes in the conflict. In an editorial in the Washington Post on Friday, Judge Richard Goldstone said, quote, civilians were not intentionally targeted by Israel as a matter of policy. This claim stands in direct contradiction with what Judge Goldstone said when the findings were first revealed.
We detail a number of specific incidents in which Israeli forces launched direct attacks against civilians with lethal consequences. These were, with only one exception, where the facts established that there was no military objective or advantage that could justify the attacks.
About 1,400 Palestinians, including hundreds of civilians and 13 Israelis, were killed in the devastating conflict. Israel launched Operation Cast Lead with the aim of ending cross-border rocket fire from Palestinian militants.
The three co-panelists on the UN probe into the 2008-2009 Israeli assault on the Gaza are rejecting the retraction by Judge Richard Goldstone of their report's key finding. Earlier this month, Goldstone said he no longer thinks Israel deliberately targeted Palestinian civilians in its three-week assault. In a statement, the three co-panelists, Hina Jalani of Pakistan, Desmond Travers of Ireland, and Christine Chinkin of write, quote, "We find it necessary to dispel any impression that subsequent developments have rendered any part of the mission's report unsubstantiated, erroneous, or inaccurate." They continue, quote, "Had we given in to pressures from any quarter to sanitize our conclusion, we would be doing a serious injustice to hundreds of innocent civilians killed during the Gaza conflict, the thousands injured, and the hundreds of thousands whose lives continue to be deeply affected by the conflict and the blockade," they wrote. Newly disclosed diplomatic cables released by WikiLeaks reveal the Obama administration led a vigorous campaign to stymie an independent UN investigation into possible war crimes committed by Israel during its assault on Gaza in 2008 and 2009. The campaign was led by Susan Rice, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. According to the magazine Foreign Policy, Rice issued a veiled warning in one cable to the president of the International Criminal Court. She warned an investigation into alleged Israeli crimes could damage the ICC's standing with the United States at a time when the new administration was moving closer to the tribunal.
I go back,
I'd like to know.
But Michael, Ambassador, I go back and I say, if these were 3,000 rockets in American towns and cities, if this was two-thirds of the American population, that would be 200 million people in bomb shelters.
Exactly.
Are we saying that we wouldn't knock out the infrastructure of the enemies that were attacking us? That raises a serious question. Well, that raises a serious question from my perspective about moral clarity and what I would call corruption if we don't see who's right and who's wrong here.
Please understand that what's going on in Gaza, about an hour from here, there are about 70,000 Israelis. Most of them are reservists who have left their homes, their families, their jobs. They've gotten into
the representatives of the Palestinian people to join the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and the ICJ, and to join the Rome Statute as well, in order to see these war criminals, the leaders of Israel, the generals and soldiers of Israel, behind bars. It's high time now to take a serious and concrete action. People on the ground here in Gaza have stopped banking on the so-called, official bodies of international community, such as the United Nations, Security Council, European Union, etc., etc. Because no matter what you do, one wonders how many dead bodies of Palestinian children of Gaza, how many amputated bodies of Palestinian women of Gaza does the international community want to see in order to act? And what we are calling for, and here I'm speaking on behalf of civil society organizations in Gaza, the overwhelming majority of which issued a statement in the second week of the current massacre, calling on the international community to boycott apartheid Israel, to stop all military deals and to launch a military embargo against apartheid Israel, and to divest from apartheid Israel, exactly the same way the international community boycotted apartheid South Africa in the 70s and the 80s. The only way was for us and for the international community to see the end of the apartheid system of South Africa was to boycott it. And I mean, so far what we have been seeing is, continuous war crimes against us, civilians of the Gaza Strip. So far, the number of those who have got killed on the streets of Gaza has risen to more than 1,350, and 95% of whom are civilians. And the international community is still watching. Worse than that, the American government, the Secretary General of the United Nations, is actually blaming both sides, as if you have two equal parties involved in war crimes committed here on the ground in Gaza. You have one party that is the Israeli occupation forces, that is considered the fourth strongest army in the world, equipped with Merkava tanks, equipped with American-made F-16, equipped with phosphorus bombs and more than 450 nuclear hits, using all of its military arsenal against armless civilians who are in densely populated areas. And I need to remind you, your viewers, that Gaza is the most densely populated area on the face of Earth. We are talking about 360 square kilometers, where 1.8 million people are living. Wherever you shoot, wherever and whenever you shoot in Gaza, you will definitely kill somebody. Now, if Israel goes on acting like this, you will see the end of Gaza, but not only the end of Gaza, it will be the end of the Palestinian cause altogether. And that's why every single person on the ground here in Gaza is supporting Palestinian resistance. And let me make myself very clear about this. When I say Palestinian resistance, I do not refer to only one political organization on the ground. I'm referring to all political organizations that have been actually coordinating to get together, from Hamas to Islamic Jihad to the Marxist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, even Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, that is the military wing of Fatah. And I think it's time for the international community to live up to its responsibility, but also it's time for the Palestinian leadership to live up to its historic responsibility and cancel the disastrous Oslo Accords, and cancel all security coordinations with apartheid Israel, because security coordination with apartheid Israel has been offering a fig leaf to Israel's crimes in Gaza. What we need from today is to end all forms of normalization with Israel and take Israeli leaders to task by applying for a membership at the ICC and the ICJ.
Yeah, well,
the uniforms, they've signed on to guns, something like the Minutemen in the American Revolution. They've gone out to fight for our homes. In America, there's been a lot of war weariness. I certainly was witness to it when I was in Washington for nearly 5 years, and that was after a decade or more of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've been at war for 66 years here without a minute of let-up, and war weariness is not an option for us. We can't bring our troops home. Our troops are home.
They want to
They're fighting on our soil. They're fighting for our housing. But understand this.
Their own charter calls for your destruction. How could you not fight back?
But it's even more than that, Sean. What Israel is fighting an hour south of where I'm talking to now is not just for Israel's safety, it's for safety of you, for the United States. Hamas is no different than Al-Qaeda. Hamas is no different than ISIS and Nusra. It's the same radical jihadist theology that seeks to destroy not just Israel. Israel's just a stepping stone on the route to start destroying the West. So you got 70,000 Israelis tonight fighting for you, and make no mistake about it. And that's why Israel has to win this round. We've got to break that cycle. We've got to crush Hamas, and we've got to create a new status quo down there.
If the United States does not stand with Israel, it is evidence of deep moral corruption, in my view. Michael, thank you for being with us.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. They're not a signatory to it. It didn't happen back in 2008, if you remember, Haydar 8. That number of 1,300 deaths didn't happen in any shape or form to have Israel be held accountable. Abdullah, let's get beyond the deaths and destruction and talk politically about what may be a possibility here. Abdullah, what do you see as being the deadlock right now? Are we looking at Hamas and the PA on one page when it comes to a push for getting the rights of Palestinians? What types of dynamics are involved there? Do you think that it's going to be fruitful? We understand that there's a delegation of Fatah and some Hamas representatives in Egypt currently talking about a ceasefire agreement. Of course, I think what is going to cause this not to happen, Israel and the U.S. both have come out and said that Hamas and the Gaza Strip needs to be demilitarized.
Let me correct something. I don't want to enter into dialogue with any of your guests because we have one enemy. We are in the middle of a battlefield and we only concentrate on our enemy. Our enemy is only the occupier of our land, which is Israel. Anything else is beside the point and has no place here whatsoever, only adding some division that we don't need it at this stage. That's number one. Number two is the Palestinian leadership, which within the PLO, which represents the Palestinian people. It is the legal personality of Palestine that is recognized at all levels, including at the United Nations level. And this leadership, in coordination with those who are not members of the PLO, which is Hamas and Islamic Jihad, we agreed that the goals of Israel is not only to kill more Palestinians. They use the killing of the Palestinians to break the will of our people in pursuing our rights, our national rights, to be free from occupation and to establish our state. We have consensus among all Palestinian groups, including Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And therefore, we have to confront the objectives of Israel through its aggression on Gaza, which started before that in the West Bank and still going on in the West Bank.